Yo, YouTube, we're back. I'm back, and I have three amazing guests with me. And so if you guys have been paying attention, last week I uploaded a video with these three amazing, smart, really dedicated men to seeing this world grow stronger through the evolution or the elevation of masculinity. And so we've decided. Let me make sure I get rid of this. I'm hearing myself. I don't know how to make it go away. Huh. I'm not the smart guy in the room, clearly, because I can't figure out how to work this stuff. But I'm going to figure it out here. I don't have any windows open, but this is the first time I'm doing this on Ecamm Live, so I probably got something messed up. I'm going to close all my browsers. Oh, I see. There it is. I had a latent window open. Wow, cool. So you know this is real. Anyway, so I decided that this week we would come back together, and I wanted to talk to these guys and share with you a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is defending marriage in this degenerate age. So we're going to open up the discussion, and we're going to speak to you from various perspectives. We have some men who are here married with many children, some married with a few children. I probably have the least children, I think, here between the two married men or the three married men here. And we're going to deliver to you what needs to be known in terms of marriage and family and making it great in this degenerate age. So welcome, Will Knowland. We got Timothy Gordon.
Hey, Elliot, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, brother. Thank you. And so Will and I did an interview a couple months ago, which I thought was amazing. And so you guys might remember him. Timothy Gordon is here. Rules for Retrogrades. And I've mentioned his book, The Case for Patriarchy, in several of my videos. And I even adopted one of my favorite new terms from Timothy, which is weaponized chastity. And so, Timothy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you again, Ellie.
Yeah, dude. Looking forward to this and our continued conversation over the weeks. And then Dr. Michael Robillard. Dr. Michael, your avatar is of a dude that looks like he's kicking someone's butt. Are you into MMA or fighting?
Yeah. That was my first amateur fight that I did 2 months ago. Yeah, so it was hit a double leg on the guy right off the bat, and it went well, and I won. So it was good.
Very awesome. Okay, cool. So thank you. Let's begin with this question, specifically for Will and Timothy, because they're both married. Michael's on his way. Will, how is your life better as a married man?
It's a good question. So, first point I would say is that it's about companionship. The marriage isn't just for the generation and the education of children. It's also for the communion between the husband and wife, for the good of the husband and wife. So the friendship that a wife offers a husband is on a deeper level than anything that another man can. When God made Adam a companion, he made him a woman, not another man. So that companionship is one thing that, apart from the joy and blessing of children, is a real benefit. And even analyzed in purely secular terms, looking at what marriage looks like practically in a man's life, well, married men earn more, they're happier, they have more sex, they're happier with their sex lives, they live longer, and in fact, even sadly, men who end up divorced are financially better off than men who were never married. So marriage has all kinds of benefits for men, even in purely secular terms. But then, of course, we can get into all the spiritual benefits as well, because it's not just a natural institution, it's also a sacrament. But I would start with just natural law alone. Marriage is replete with benefits for men.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Timothy, how about yourself, man? You've got as I think both you and Will have more than 6 children, right? Is that correct? 7.
6 plus 1. Yeah, 7. Yeah,
Will,
man.
you too, right? You have it's 7.
Yep, that's it.
Wow. God bless you guys. So Timothy, tell us, how was your life better as a married man?
Economics, volumetrics, econometrics, all of these things are leveled against not waiting to shack up with someone while you're dating. They're 10 times more efficacious, economics, volumetrics, econometrics, if you get married to someone young and quick, and probably wait. Don't move into to an apartment with someone until you get married, for practical reasons at least. Once you do, if you get married young, you get married even as a student, get married right out of high school, get married in college, it makes your life a million times easier. And why? The rationale is what Will said. I don't want to double up, but I just wanted to hit the pragmatic point that if you go and find the woman for you, a woman that fits, a woman that's right, it's a little tricky to do, but it can be done. Everything Will said is absolutely true. Aristotle, who's called the master of those who know, 350 years before Jesus came to earth, says that a best friendship is possible between a man and wife. It's a best friendship, like Will said, that's, well, like he implied, I guess. It's not between equals. I could be closer, and I am closer with my wife than any man, and I have lots of close male friendships, because she was made to be my handmaiden. She loves being my handmaiden. I was made to protect her and to help get her ultimately to heaven, and I love doing that. And it's a unique dovetailing that is absolutely unfindable in the rest of the world. So economics, volumetrics, econometrics, this is the economy of the household. And absolutely successful men, 9 times out of 10, you find a very, very cool, submissive wife who enjoys being a handmaiden behind them.
Amazing. I want to come back to Dr. Michael in a second, because you have a unique perspective with regard to marriage, being on the outside looking in. But I just want to add my 2 cents that I am an unstable man. I'll be completely honest. I have attention deficit out the ears. And if my sexual energy wasn't focused in on one woman since the time I was a teenager, I probably would be living a very chaotic life. And so just from, my subjective experience, had I not had the focus of giving my love and attention to one woman, I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't be looking at the man that is living what seems to be a strong, stable, focused, and profitable life. Having one woman is, in many ways the same as being focused on one business, right? As entrepreneurs know, we have entrepreneurial ADD, and sometimes we're always chasing shiny objects and seeing different opportunities and things, and then spreading ourselves thin, which I've experienced myself as well. But having my sexual energy focused in on one woman and being fruitful with her has brought a myriad of blessings to my life. Now, I asked, Mike and I were talking a little bit before the show, and Michael wants to get married. Given the climate that we're living in today, why would a man want to get married? Michael, what is the desire there for you?
Well, I would say just all the things that you gentlemen just mentioned. I mean, particularly it being a sacrament and being how man is oriented, right? We are directed ultimately towards heaven and towards good things. And, marriage and monogamy, it is one of the highest goods. It's faith, then family. I think that's what we're ordered to, unless for the very small segment of people that have a vocation towards priesthood. Most men, they're going to be called towards that good. I think myself and probably a lot of people of our generation, though, hit some element of cynicism along the way, and got thrown off the path. At least that was the case for me. So I'm just trying to get back on it and remember what the what the higher goods are in the world.
Why are so many men skeptical of marriage today then?
Well, I think, especially if you're listening to elements of the red pill or MGTOW community, this is derivative too from the sort of evolutionary determinism folks too, where they're just like, oh, we're just animals. Everything's just like bonobos trying to bang each other. There's no higher purpose to the good of sexuality. It's all just this free for all. And I think that has this downstream. It's incorrect, but it has this downstream appeal to those communities, and then you hear it echoed to younger men, and it just has its own causal power. So I think if we get the metaphysics of man wrong, then everything's thrown off, and that's essentially what we're looking at.
Timothy or Will, what do you have to say about that, right? Like, so we speak to lots of young men, right? Like they follow us on YouTube and whatnot. And there's, at least for myself, coming into this space from perhaps a less holy perspective, I'm surrounded by men who still scratch their head at why someone would want to get married given the laws and, the state of women today. What do you guys have to say to men who are still questioning whether or not marriage is a viable option?
Well, I'll take a crack at it. Firstly, I would say that the specter of feminism, that which first and foremost really ruined Western civilization, starting a lot earlier than folks think, that's the malady. And the so-called remedy is a secondary malady, because the remedy, the one that we're addressing to obliquely and at other times more directly like today, is, like Mike said, the red pill community. And a lot of what they say is bullshit. It's not bullshit to the same extent that feminism is. The idea that there is no ordinal ranking of man and wife within Christendom, within the Christian family. That's nonsense, and that's evil, and that's actually part of the original sin between Adam and Eve. So that's really fundamental to leftism and to all the various subversions that you see making the life of man miserable. And by man, I mean men and women in this case. But the remedy, the so-called remedy, has lots of snake oil incidentally or maybe intentionally peppered in as well. I mean, the idea that in an era of fourth wave feminism, it's impossible to find a good woman, that's just wrong. It's very, very difficult, maybe asymptotically approaching impossible for a 50-year-old or a 60, someone, to meet a woman at 55, because this is the Generation X, which was really, really the first generation after the full-on sexual revolution, where women were encouraged to debase themselves, defile themselves, and to think that they're going to be ordinally equal with their husbands within the family, or really above. Equal means above in the sense that the feminists used it. But that is a lie. If you marry young, if you use high school or maybe the very first couple years of college as a time to do whatever you're supposed to do, get good grades if you can, but look at it as a secondary way to get a wife or a husband. It's altogether possible. I taught, high school and college, some combination, for 10 years. And let me just say, the people don't really get too touched by feminism until junior, senior year of college, typically, on average. They're finding it in freshman and sophomore year of college. And especially coming out of high school, it's altogether possible to find a wife that wants to be your handmaiden, that wants to. This is my wife's book. It's called Ask Your Husband. Still totally possible to do.
Will, why are so men skeptical of marriage today?
I think another reason is fear. Thomas Sowell has a good paragraph in his book, Dismantling America, on this idea that over half of marriages end in divorce, which is one of the things that guys will say. I'm not getting married because it's likely to end in divorce. And Sol points out that there was a lot of massaging of these statistics to try to get that myth out there off the ground. He says that, first of all, it started with girls aged 16. Anyone over 16 female was counted as women. And then they also counted women whose husbands were serving abroad in the military or in jail as unmarried. And if you do all this, then you get the 51% of women who've never married. But Sol says if you actually do this correctly, then we've got 25% of women who have never married. And also the divorce rate is far, far lower than is presented. It's the lowest in about 50 years currently. So the chances of having a stable marriage are actually better now than ever. But men have got this idea that the risk is too great. I've already pointed out that if you are a divorced man, you're still going to be financially better off than a single man. So I don't think that crunching the numbers with a calculator and saying that it's too much of a financial risk makes sense. So fear, that's one factor. But I think trying to minimize risk in your life is bad as a man, ultimately. Men are made for risk. We're made for battle. And marriage is ultimately the battleground for the future of society. And if you don't want to step onto it because you're afraid, that's ultimately a form of cowardice, I would argue. So why would you get married then? Well, fundamentally, because you want to have sex. I think on a basic level, most guys do want to have sex. And if they are having sex outside marriage, then this is a form of feminism. You're continuing the destructive work of the sexual revolution. Why was unmarried sex pushed so hard by the radicals wanting to undermine the family and restructure society? Because nothing else affects society like it. So men have got this urge. They want pleasure, but they're thinking, can I get it without the responsibility of the family? This is tempting. I like the sound of that, but it's a honey trap and men mustn't fall into it. Marriage is how you don't.
Can I add a couple points to what Will said?
Please.
Yeah, the another major statistic padding that essentially spurious 51%, Elliot, is it recounts the second and third and fourth married of marriages of the civilly divorced and remarrieds, which way boosts the statistic. I didn't know about some of the other ones, but essentially also a reason. I don't just want to blame the red pill community in MGTOW and all that. Essentially, Christianity itself, the Protestant sects, Catholicism, all of them that I know of, have stood down, particularly the mainline Protestant sects and Catholicism. Our church has stood down on articulating its robust defense of how lovely marriage is, which is really the hierarchy. Men are attracted to hierarchy, and if you go and become a householder, you get to be the leader. All men are craving these days in a post-feminist world to be leaders, so they're coming up with wine clubs, golf clubs, comic book clubs to regain their youth, and they're like establishing hierarchies because that's what men do. One man isn't really intended to be ruling over another household man or any other men. We're intended to govern our own households. That's how you satisfy that urge for hierarchy. And really, Catholicism, Protestantism, all forms of Christianity have been embarrassed by this, essentially an embarrassment of riches, and instead of articulating it, which would make men much, much more attracted to marriage than it's currently doing.
So someone mentions in the chat that the justice system is very unfair towards men, and many men take a logical stance in terms of not choosing marriage because of its financial ramifications and being that the law is against them. What do you say to a man who offers that as his reason for avoiding marriage?
What financial ramifications? The stats show that divorced men are better off financially than never married men. So if it's money you're worried about, that's not a good argument. Is it just risk in general that you're afraid of? Well, some things are worth the risk. And given the importance of marriage to your happiness and to the stability of society, this is one of those goods that is worth fighting for and taking a risk for.
What are some of the enemies to marriage and family today? You know, you mentioned the name, said radicals before. Who are these radicals, and what are some of their tools that have been used in order to profane marriage?
I list in my book, and I think I tweeted it the other day, the first order radicals against marriage, against the family, against the good of society is, of course, the feminists. But when I say the feminists, I mean that there's not a meaningful distinction between first wave feminists, which began around 1850, in the year 1848, actually at a convention they held and made a kind of declaration of independence. Second wave, third wave, fourth wave, it's all the same beast. So that's the first order enemy, Elliot. But then all these other sides, some of whom claim to be or would ostensibly be counted as being on the right, and of course on the left, the mutual submissionists within the Roman Catholic tradition, the moderate Christians, we call them nerdy Ned Flanders types, that accept the distinction between first, second, third, fourth wave feminism. That tends to be the second order feminist, is someone that accepts the distinction. First wave feminism, that was good. Second, third, fourth, that became bad. In other words, there is a good form of feminism. Anyone who posits that proposition, that there's any good form of feminism, is your enemy. And too many center-right Christians have bought that propaganda. Then, of course, you've got the far-right people, like the MGTOW people, the red-pilled manosphere. They seem to buy that proposition, though you'll hear occasionally some extra red-pilled ones that understand first-wave feminism was bad from the beginning. It tends to be breakdown into groups of feminism, the feminists, and those who bought the feminist lie.
Michael, as an unmarried man looking to be married at some point, what would you say are some of the societal ills that are roadblocks on your path towards finding a good wife? In other words, for example, contraception. What are some of these things that we take for granted that are making it difficult for a man who wants to find a wife or for marriage to work today?
Yeah, I would say definitely contraception, pornography of all various kinds within the space of social media as such, Tinder, online dating, and then also, I mean, you had that commentary from the one comment about law and legislation, and I think that needs to be addressed, right? Because prudence aside, we need to ask yourself whether or not those laws that we are presently under, right? That we are under an official gynocentric legislation and a gynocentric regime. To what degree are those laws just? And if we come to the conclusion that they're not just, then what we need to do is do what the feminists did, is collectivize and agitate to get them removed. And anything short of that, I think, is a failure to acknowledge that we are underneath that legal regime. So the totality of those things, that whole mix of things, I think, in my mind at least, that's in the pot.
Totally, and each one of those is a rabbit hole that could take us years to uncover its depths. How about contraception? It sounds so strange. I know prior to this awakening, I couldn't understand why anybody would be against contraception. It keeps us from having quote unquote unwanted babies. At least that's the mindset. How does contraception add to the degradation of marriage?
The main end of marriage is the generation of children and the education of children. And the problem with contraception is it separates sex from its natural end, which is children. It's really hard to have sex without it resulting in pregnancy. It takes a lot of fiddling with nature, a lot of cunning interference. And the pill is probably the most widespread, most impactful way of achieving this. And you need to think about why the pill and the sexual revolution go together. And it's all about undermining the family, specifically men's authority with the family. What's interesting is that most of the foundational feminist thinkers actually were men. If you look at the debt that the female feminists owe to Engels, for example, and to Marx, it's huge. So this idea that feminism is something that women have done to men and men need to sit around blaming feminists, ultimately that's a really emasculating victim narrative. Men need to look at the fact that the main attraction was pleasure without responsibility. So fine, if guys don't want to have marriage, don't have sex either. Otherwise, fundamentally, you're no different from the feminists on a couple of points that were absolutely essential to feminism. Sex outside marriage, contraception, that's what the sexual revolution was all about. If you accept those things, you are continuing it. And the left's greatest victory, in my opinion, in this area is convincing guys that that kind of behavior is in any way alpha. And it's just red pill somehow, and it works. Practically it works. Well, look at the ghetto. How's it working out there?
Yeah. A second point, I keep piggybacking on no homo, is basically to underscore this analogy. He said sex without conceiving life is difficult. And folks out there are scratching their head because, guys, listen to me, you're propagandized. The purpose of sex is pregnancy. Just like the purpose of taking in nutrients is of eating is to take in nutrients and to stimulate your metabolism, right? It's like trying to eat a tasty piece of cake without getting the calories. And it's very similar insofar as the metabolic system and the reproductive system of man is in the first order ordered toward a very specific ergonomic system of organelles working together. Reproduction in the one case, metabolism in the other. But both systems, the human systems of organs, also deliver a major payload that confuses us, pleasure. The difference is if you abuse your metabolic system, the way that contraception is a bona fide abuse of your reproductive system, you're trying to quell it, you're trying to restrain it from doing its job. You can't get away with it in the case of eating, right? No one wants to walk around and be a great big fat ass because you wear like a scarlet A, your flab on your frame. Unfortunately, I do think it's unfortunate that men who are fornicating, particularly under the auspices of contraception, don't wear their shame on their lapels because that would keep them from doing it so much. But it's the exact same thing. It's the surrogation, the substitution of the secondary pleasure that follows upon eating or copulating as the first thing. Well, I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, if we put first things first and second things second, we get both. If we put first things second and second things first, we get neither. That's the case with copulation, particularly in the case of contraception.
Dr. Michael, so as a man seeking marriage, what are some of the things that you would look for in a woman that would be open to this, the things that we're talking about here today? You know, what are some red flags that you're avoiding when it comes to potential wives?
Yeah, I think in the past when I was immersed in this secular worldview, I wasn't thinking in these terms at all. So I was just thinking, whatever is she hot? Is do we get along, minimally in terms of our interests or something like that. But I think now it's what Tim said. Is she holy? Is she directed towards God? That's the first thing. Is she is her way of being oriented around the parish? And then that will be the she's aiming at first things too, and then marriage and commitment, that's the second thing, a close second, but still the second of the priorities. So I'd be looking for a woman that has that priority, has those in order, and isn't flipped, and then is also submissive and committed to being as Tim said, a submissive, helpful teammate and companion.
That's such a triggering term today, right? To say submissive,
It is, yeah.
in terms of a wife to her husband. What does that even mean, and what does that look like?
I've seen it firsthand at Tim's house when I was there for an entire month, working on our book together, and there's just I mean, obviously it's chaotic. He's got kids running around all over the place, and guests coming and leaving. But there's a palpable order and beauty to that entire ecosystem that him and his wife have built, and it's just like you feel it. It's organized, and it's Tim's leading, and his wife is just lovely and following and helping, and it's this great union of male leadership and female followership, and there's an organization that comes to that is greater than the sum of its parts, and I'm like, this is a functional household. This is what it should look like.
Tim, how did you do that? How did you make your wife submit to you? Or was she submissive when you found her?
Well, largely it's a autobiographical compilation of places that we've both been. But in the first place, this isn't something I direct most men to. We were friends first. That's not actually natural. It's because I was dating around a lot in college, and she was dating at the time my buddy, kind of casually, but we became just great friends. And within a group of friends, it was unnatural how for a period of months we were able to become friends first, even though clearly we were attracted to each other. But a lot of it's compatibility. The left will tell you that one man and one woman are compatible with, like, on a 1 in 50 basis. That's maybe optimal, maximal compatibility where things move really, 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 really extra smoothly. I would say I count myself among the blessed. I think Steph and I are maximally compatible. She never got touched by feminism. I knew her from the time, a little before she graduated high school. I'm a year and a half older. And we were just great friends, and she always admired the sort of leader I am, I guess. And I always admired how she's funny and entertaining and fun, but at the same time just wants to help. Beautiful and effeminate, and so we have maximal, I'd say, fit, but far more than 1 out of 50 men and women, because they are attracted to each other, because they do ultimately want to have sex with each other and both be happy in between having sex with each other, like Will said, that they're willing to do it and to make it work at a far greater rate than 1 out of 50. But I mean, the point is this: it's nature. The way that one receives the grace of the sacrament of marriage is by not fighting nature, Elliot. I mean, you know this. Will, you know this. Like, you just don't fight against it. Women are natural followers. And I mean, my wife is really genuinely, she likes to make, there's no female comedian I laugh at or any, I don't think women are funny in that sense, but she's genuinely good with a one-liner. She's fiercely loyal. She's a lot of fun. We have our 7 kids running around a lot. If we don't have too much time in a day, we try to run the household like Teresa Lisieux's parents. Just have some fun. You got to do what you got to do, and then play together. And I always knew both of us had a high appreciation for that model of parenting. Get your chores done, pray together, do the stuff that's obligation bound for a household to run properly. but then have fun where you can. And I just don't see a lot of today, especially with, I went on Matt Fradd's show, I guess it's 2 summers ago now. I can't remember what it was. And I said, hey, look, man, I was in Atlanta. I'd just come from Disney World the day before, drove over there in my RV. And I was like, man, I see all these shrill, shrieking, chubby wives henpecking their husbands. And I told the story of when we were leaving Disney World, a woman was just yelling at her husband about she wanted a Diet Dr. Pepper, not a Diet Coke. And he'd been nice enough to go get her this. And she's yelling. Me and Steph were shocked. Steph was about to go over there and use this line that she always wants to use. She's like, sweetheart, you're not cute enough to be this rude to him. That's your king. You need to, you picked him. Even if he doesn't look like a king or act like one, you picked him. Don't do that. That's a major, major no-no. And that's what she tells women in her book is make it work. Make the household work. So how does the household work? A commitment to nature. Men are the leaders, women are the followers. And then just let it take its course and put your own unique style on it. So it's a combination of nature and nurture. Do what you and your wife like to do. You don't have to follow rules of the suburbs. If you don't like being in the car, then don't put your kids in a million sports. You don't have to follow all these stupid little rules of nomos convention. Follow the rule of physis, nature. Man's definitely in charge. And then, follow the rules of God, of course. But outside of that, have a little bit of fun. That's how we operate our household.
It's so interesting. Your wife wrote the book on this topic, right? Ask Your Husband. It's called. What is some of the advice that she gives women in that book? Because it was written for women, I guess, based on the title alone. She's speaking to women. We're speaking to guys, and almost like on the outside, trying to peer in. What do women need to know in order to find a traditional husband and live a beautiful, amazing life like the men here?
Well, Mike knows the whole narrative behind this book well, but as you can imagine, I'll just start out by saying she got come after hard, and she likes it. She laughs, she thinks it's funny, but the book got come after really hard. It was selling off the shelves for about the first month, and then a number of things happened. I'm not even going to go into what, but you can imagine the book was selling off the shelf. It's now self-published, and you could get that book for your wives and kids. Mother Miriam, awesome old nun, first got a hold of it and was like, wow, this is impressive. She said privately anyway. So what Steph's saying is to women, it's like, look, you pick the man. There are a few things. Do you want him to stay fit for you? Well, men are 10 times more visual than we are, so you stay fit for him too. It's 10 times more important the other way. No body positivity. I mean, do the best job you can at staying fit. Make it a major daily goal. One of the biggest problems in marriage, why men are porn-addled slave freaks that don't look at their wives, is because the men are weak, and because their wives are also weak, giving into this culture of body positivity. It's a huge problem. Once somebody has been incentivized to get married, man to woman, woman to man, just becoming complacent and letting themselves go. That's an obvious, huge elephant in the room. If men and women are no longer trying to attract one another in marriage, why would you try to attract someone before they're even yours? Husband, wife, husband. And that just pissed everyone off. Then she said, there's a chapter called Wear What He Likes, Do What He Likes.
I love
you
that.
You can imagine the feminists freaking out. Yeah, it's like, look, and same thing to the guys, right? But she's not, St. Paul says women are not allowed to teach men. They're underneath men. So, but women are allowed to teach, according to Holy Scripture, other women. So wear what he likes, do what he likes. And if you want him to do or wear something for you, even though women are vastly less visual than we are. Men need to remember that. But if she's that way, then do it for her. Why would you not grant these boons, sexual or otherwise, in marriage? And essentially she's saying you need to know that you're a handmaiden. Most commercials, if you look at them now, I'd say 4 out of 5 at the very least, has strong iconography with a woman implicitly being leader. You guys all know what I'm talking about. The man overtaking womanly duties. The man taking up the woman's hobby. Steph's like, look, we're the handmaidens. We should take an interest in what they're doing. If your husband has a football game on, you don't have to do it every time, but if he has a basketball or football game on, go take an interest in it. You'll probably get interested in it. That's another point that the feminist hated. She's like, male hobbies are more important than female hobbies. They're what cultivate hunting, military, virtue. If you take an interest, you'll become better friends, and you will probably be somewhat legitimately interested. Not in all those things, but in some of them. Feminists didn't like that. Basically, she's just telling a woman at every step throughout the day, stay home, take care of the house. One income is definitely enough. We made it work before I did this, even when I was just a teacher. And it's a lovely life. Women will say, what do I do when I'm at home before I have kids? Garden, keep a journal,
Right.
Do crafts, take a nap, hell, watch TV, but cook, bake, sew. She has a lot of advice. People should check the book out.
I don't remember where I heard the term. It may have been from your book, but the term feminine luxury. Oh, no. Actually, I think I remember reading it in Stephen Arnio's book, The Oracle, where women who live in this traditional way and submit to their husbands and are under their mantle have a special grace, and it allows them to relax. And that relaxation, especially in our day and age, is seen, on one hand to denote a sense of weakness, right? You don't have to be vigilant and you have to be hardcore all the time. But when I look at the peace and the joy in my wife's life and her willingness to want to follow my lead, all I see is luxury. She's so happy and relaxed. Will, how long have you been married, man? You've got 7 children.
Yeah, so I'm 36 now and married at 23. So it's been a long time and learned some good lessons along the way. One of the big ones I want to point out is that when people hear authority, they think tyranny. Mm-hmm. The man has authority over the wife. He must be a tyrant. And that's because liberalism has made so many inroads into people's basic assumptions now that they can't hear authority without thinking oppression. But ultimately, there's no society possible without authority in some form. And the way in which so-called liberal democracies tend towards totalitarian states historically should tell you that. But within the family, what this means is that the father, the husband, has authority as the servant of the wife and the children. In leading them, he is serving them. So the authority is not him getting his own way the whole time. Right. That's not what it means. Even as the captain of a football team, the authority you have doesn't mean you get your own way. It means you want to control the team for its aim, which is winning, playing well. Same with the family. Yes, the father has authority, but what's it for? Just so he says stuff and it happens? No. It's so that we raise the kids well. And from a Christian perspective, it's also so you get everyone to heaven, ultimately. Right. So this is big responsibility. And a woman who has chosen well, as a good husband, it's a joy to follow that kind of leadership. It gives you direction in your life and it's for your benefit. It's not oppression. And Elliot, that's what you just described with what your wife's life is like.
How did you find your wife?
So we met like Tim and his wife Steph when we were young. And part of it is sexual chemistry. That's how men and women are attracted to each other. That's just nature taking its course. And then the other part of it is psychological compatibility. So I think you need to choose wisely, not just in terms of natural attraction, but think what kind of woman you're going to mesh well with. And I think that men need to prioritize looks less and things like chastity, virtue more. So you might have a girl that you know who is 10 out of 10 attractive, But does that mean she's going to be the best wife for you? Maybe you could get lucky and the 10 out of 10 also hits all the other boxes you need to tick. Great. But there might be another woman who is slightly less attractive physically, but over time will prove to be the much better choice of wife for you. So guys on Instagram falling for thirst traps of girls who obviously are not chaste whatsoever, I think be careful about that. I think there are risks involved there, and you can be smarter.
I see. So I have a lot of men who follow me and some of my students, and are starting to wake up to many of the ideas that we're saying. And it sounds very, look, I think men delight in the idea of being the authority and being a leader in the home and having a wife that's submissive to them. But if they find themselves in a marriage, and a lot of them, like, it almost, I'm not apologizing, but it's like, in a way, I start to build a wedge between them and their wives when the men start to realize, oh man, I'm living in a disordered home, and they panic, and there's something that's referred often to as like red pill rage, and the guys they don't know what to do. What advice would you guys give to a man who may be listening to this or is coming across this idea that, in fact, I am living with a feminist and my home is disordered? We have multiple children. How do I rectify this?
It's a very rectifiable situation. If you read my book, The Case for Patriarchy, you might just get red pill rage. If you, again, I hate to shill for the book, but if you read Ask Your Husband, or you have your wife read it, we've been contacted by hundreds, at least dozens, probably hundreds of women that read Steph's book and were like, I didn't even know. We were swimming in this dirty water. When you swim in dirty water, feminist water, filthy water, you don't know how dirty it is until you get outside the bowl and you can look in and you're like, I was swimming in that? That was just normal to me. So many women are like, I started implementing the very specific things here that are just the daily instantiations of being a handmaiden that I didn't even know about, because I hadn't even heard about them from a lot of right-wing Christian types or secular right-wingers. They'll talk about what is a woman, Matt Walsh's movie that takes on, the trannies, but they won't take on the feminists, which are the first order transsexualists. To be a transsexual is to act or to think you're the opposite sex. Well, that's what feminism was. It's the first order gender dysphoria. So my book might just make guys feel like, what do I do? Though I do give some pointers. Ask Your Husband really shows women, don't freak out. Here's how you can get back on the right track. It'll make your life amazing. It'll make your husband's life amazing. It's like going with the current instead of fighting it. It'll put you in a better mood. St. John Chrysostom says women, if they're put in high-stress situations, are naturally short-tempered. Does this sound familiar, man? If you're asking them essentially to be the leader, to be a man, to be the breadwinner, to be the priest of the home, which is what most of my friends' homes was like, even who's dragging you to church, your mom. You're putting the wife in the man's shoes. If you stop doing it, it's very natural and very easy, but you need some specifics. So again, ask your husband for your wife or your girlfriend. So many people have contacted us personally, or like, thank you. I mean, Steph personally, and said, this is very doable.
Amazing. Will, what advice would you give to a man who finds himself in a disordered home?
Blame yourself as far as possible. First of all, I think the best way to look at feminism is a symptom of male failure. So when men relinquish their authority, somebody has to fill that spot, and women are going to do so. So if there's a problem within the family or a problem within society more broadly, you can normally look at male failings as the first place. So are you taking responsibility for all the things that you should be taking responsibility for? Are you doing a good job? If you are, then people will be happy to follow. But don't fall for the victim narrative of blaming somebody else as the first thing you look at. I think that's a temptation that goes nowhere. And it's one of the things that characterizes the manosphere currently, that women are the problem. Why are they the problem? Well, they say it's because they're all sleeping around. Who are they sleeping around with? Oh, surprise, men. So the victim narrative goes nowhere. In many ways, I think the biblical story of Samson and the trouble that following female lead can get you into, and how sex can weaken even the strongest of men, that's the parable for our times in lots of ways.
What can they actually do? So taking responsibility, it makes total sense. That's a paradigm to proceed from. What are maybe some actions that they can then take to either present this to their wives? I've had guys who they kind of drop the ball when they walk up to their wife and say, well, I want you to know that I'm supposed to be the leader here. And their wives are like, what, are you kidding me? You haven't been the leader since we've ever. What are some things that the guys can do, action steps perhaps?
Are you expecting your wife to work outside the home and provide for the family financially? If so, you are a feminist. This ultimately is where we get to crunch time. Why do you think you should be respected as a leader if you are making her serve you financially? Who are you to say that a woman's place is in the home, taking care of the children, if you're not making that possible for her to do? Those kind of things will breed resentment ultimately. So it's ultimately about leading by example.
Michael,
Yeah. And
what
also,
are some of the... Go ahead, Timothy.
I was just going to say, because everything Will says is gold. I agree with it 100%. I want people to put it in the proper context. The first rule of feminism is never for any reason at any time blame a woman for anything. Women have a role in feminism, but Will is 100% right that it's in the first order a male problem. Adam let Eve take things over, and therefore we all sinned and have to die. And I would just say that the first way to undo this, even though women will resist after they've taken over the vacuum of power, which is man's fault, women will be slightly resistant. That's the feedback Steph and I always get. So you do have to say the right things, and like Will said, lead by example. The first and best thing you can do, this is utterly consistent with what Will said, is just say, look, I'm going to make changes around here. It's my duty. I've been derelict, starting with making you work, making you be the person to drag the kids to church, making you be the one to be the moral conscience of the family. Those are all my jobs. Your life is going to get better. The kid's life is going to get better. Mine's going to get better. Just sort of watch and see, please. Just give it a couple months. You'll see I'm going to take over this role, and all of our lives are going to get better. That's what we've told people to say, and that's been the most successful thing. We're doing unofficial, imperfect science here with all the polling we've done with our books. So everything Will said is right.
Michael, I'm curious, as a man who's dating and seeking a wife, what kind of red flags do you look for in terms of having a potential deal breaker with a woman? And what kind of questions do you ask or conversations do you start in order to see if some of a woman's compatible with the traditional marriage that we're describing here?
Well, I mean, since I converted back in 2018, I've really just been focusing on just rebuilding myself and rebuilding my faith, and back to that C.S. Lewis quote of putting first things first. So I haven't been actively dating since then, and it's also a feature of what Will said. Is getting my my world ordered enough such that I can be a supportive breadwinner. So that hasn't been the first thing on my mind at all. Were I to be dating right now, then I guess the red flags I'd be looking for are signs of promiscuity, signs of, I guess, feminist indoctrination, I suppose. Looking to assert that ideology in a variety of forms. But I guess it would have to be on a case-by-case basis. I don't really have a frame of reference right now.
Mm-hmm. So I'm convinced, it's my conviction that if we're going to turn Western civilization around, it's going to happen not through the means of just men, but fathers, because the family is the grassroots, the family is the unit, the building blocks through which we're going to bring this thing around. Encouragement for men to consider marriage in this day and age. I'd like to finish with that, if I can hear from each one of you. For a man who's sort of on the fence and not really sure, what would you say to him in terms of why we should consider making marriage an option today?
The left want you to remain unmarried and ideally to have sex outside marriage, and if you have kids, to abandon them. They want more broken homes. The ghetto has taken this social experiment further than anywhere else, and the black family's been in many ways the canary in the coal mine. Look down that route, see what you think is happening there. Do you want to walk further down in that direction, or do you want to fight with everything you've got to try to pull things back from that precipice? There are all kinds of attractive messages about sleeping around and being a playboy, but the clue is in the name. It's got boy in it, not man. And ultimately, for a man, sex is about marriage, responsibility, and leaving a legacy through the family. The idea that you can just play around and there'll be no consequences is something I can't understand how anyone can believe, looking at what the real world consequences of that ideology have really been. Yeah, there's a risk involved, but there's a risk involved in everything that's worthwhile. And you're not made to wrap yourself in cotton wool and sit at home and cry about the risks of doing something great and important.
Thanks, Will. Timothy, defending marriage in a degenerate age. Why?
Because when you fight the house, when you fight nature, you always lose. The natural state of mankind is marriage. I mean, literally, it's the survival of our species depends on it. And you can't beat the house. So stop fighting nature. Much as many of the members of your audience, Elliot, and my audience have stopped fighting nature on it with regard to metabolism and nutrients, the analogy can't misserve you. It will always serve you well. Just look. Yeah, it's fun to eat a bunch of candy like every little kid does. It's funner on some days, in a base sense, to sit around on the couch and not get your weightlifting in or get in at least a little road work. But it's more satisfying and it's far better for you, and you'll feel a million times better if you do the natural thing. You work with your muscular system and your metabolic system. You'll be happier. You'll feel better for it. Do the same thing for your reproductive system. It sounds like some self-help commercial, so I'm laughing, but it's absolutely true. The sex was meant to be enjoyed. It's the major motivator in the male life. Let's be honest. It was meant to be enjoyed under three fonts: maritally, procreatively, and unitively. And that means that we are meant to have lots of sex within the confines of marriage. It's very enjoyable, but we're meant to be, at the very least, simultaneously aiming to have large families. That's also how we win and we combat the left. Also, if like women have tons of babies, they're safe from uterine cancer, breast cancer. It raises men's testosterone, which saves you from all sorts of cancers. The science doesn't lie. The left does lie about the science. So quit fighting nature. Unless you're a very small minority of men that are going to enter as Catholics, like some sort of celibate priestly class, that's a group within a group. Unless that's you, get started now, today, being virtuous, reconfiguring the way you think about sex. It's not naughty. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to be enjoyed plentifully within the confines of marriage toward having big families. Quit fighting nature and you will be happier for it. But you got to reconfigure the way you look at the world.
Michael, I like to say men have two virtuous options. There's monk or marriage, and you're living the monk lifestyle. You're weaponizing chastity, and you're waiting for marriage if it's a part of God's plan for you. What kind of advice do you give to men? Now, I want to acknowledge that living the monk lifestyle, being virtuous and chaste as a single man is a great grace, and it's an amazing place to be. It sounds odd or counterculture, but from your perspective and wisdom, what would you say to men who are choosing to not marry and the virtue of chastity?
I would say it gets back very similar to what Will said, is that the left wants you to be atomized and disaggregated and disconnected from God and disconnected from one another. That's where they want you. You know, they want you in a place of being this atomized, controllable serf. And you know, the family is the cell of society and the cell of civilization, and the protection of that is worthy of protecting. You know, as a father or in whatever monastic capacity, that's still worthy of protection because it protects us all. You know, it is the greatest defense against the tyrannical authoritarian state. So that, you know, as somebody looking at it from the outside, having not been married, it still strikes me as something that if there's anything worth defending, then it's family for its own sake, especially against all these pernicious evils that are coming after it.
Michael, what kind of projects do you've got going on right now that people would benefit from knowing about, and where could they learn more about you, brother?
Thanks. Yeah. So I got michaelrobillard.com. You can find mine and Tim's book, Don't Go to College. I also have another book called Outsourcing Duty, which is about civil military relations and some requirements of military service for, you know, protection of country. And you can find me on Substack as well. A lot of my writings are there.
Awesome. Timothy, prolific writer. I've read several of your books and I love them, dude. Thank you so much for being who you are and sharing with the world the wisdom that you've gained. Where can people find your books, find your courses? You're doing a lot of amazing things out there. Tell us more about it and where we can participate.
Thanks, Elliot, and thanks for facilitating the dialogue, as the left says today. Go to timothyjgordon.com. Well, I've written 4 books. Catholic Republic is my first one. Rules for Retrogrades is the second one. Case for Patriarchy, which we've talked about a lot today, is the third. And then me and Mike co-wrote Don't Go to College for Regnery Books, which has a lot of this stuff in it, a surprising amount of the patriarchy stuff it has in Don't Go to College. That's the most recent one. But mostly come find my stuff on YouTube, Timothy Gordon or Rules for Retrogrades. You see the sign behind me. I'm really full on. Let me just say this, gents. I'm full on this project of whatever you want to call it. I've been calling it Christian masculinism, showing how all the other groups out there, feminists or those who are overreacting or underreacting to feminism in a disordered way, are wrong. Christian masculinism is the way to retake the West. And I am right now, I've got lots of projects going on. I've got the Retrograde Classical Academy. You can find that at timothyjgordon.com as well. But I am all in on this Christian masculinism project that we've undertaken to do, you know, a podcast a week on rotating channels. It is the way to save the West.
Amen. Yeah,
Thanks.
I truly believe that. And Will, man, I love reading your posts and hearing your conversations. Man, you're so clear and so logical and concise with your advice for men. Tell us about some of the projects you got going on and where people can read your amazing writings and get a hold of your videos and all the cool stuff that you're doing to make men strong today, bro.
So people watching who don't know, I was fired from the UK's top all boys boarding school for a lecture I gave on masculinity that offended some of the feminist stuff. Since then, I've carried on with the work of teaching literature, philosophy, politics. You can get that on my YouTube channel, Knowland Knows, and on Substack as well. There's some of the spicier content that I can't put on YouTube. So check out both YouTube and Substack.
Amazing. Thanks, Will. And thank you guys for joining me here today. Thanks, Timothy, for putting this group together. We'll likely be on either Michael or Will's YouTube channel next week. So definitely go subscribe to all three of these gentlemen's YouTube channels if this is of interest to you. I'll be sure to link them down below, and that you can continue to follow us in our weekly videos. And thank you, YouTube fans, for being here and taking such interest in making men strong again, defending marriage in the degenerate age, and rebuilding the West from the ground up. And so that's it. That's all. We're done, folks. Until next time, God bless.